Gridiron Grinder! Hut hut hike!
And we're rolling. It's Gridiron Grinder time. I'm Ryan. With me, as always, is my buddy James. Just a couple of dudes hanging out, sipping on some whiskey, talking about what's going on in the NFL each week. Tonight's 30. Tonight's episode 32. Been rolling strong every Friday night, and so for tonight we are going to do name that stadium, which is kind of like our entry segment we do every week. Then we're going to talk about some of the big news out of the NFL from this past week. After that, James and I are going to take a look at the AFC, all the teams on that side of the league, and what players might be prioritized for potential franchise tag. And after that, we'll close it off with the question of the week. And so, yeah, simple stuff. With all that being said, how's it going tonight, James?
It's going good. It's Friday night, so week's over. Another week down. Like 400 more to go this year.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, hey, there's no football games, but we're gonna keep filling the time. There's always something to read about, always something to talk about, and so, we're gonna keep this shit going as long as you're interested in doing it. I'm gonna keep it going. So that's cool. All right, so why don't we let's do name that stadium. So this is the part of the show for anybody who's watching. As you can see, James is traveling the country. Every week he puts a new stadium in his background. And basically, we're asking our viewers that if you think you know what stadium that is, take a shot, throw your guess in our comments section. And if you're the first person to get it right, we will give you a special shout out in next week's show. For this past week, geez, I don't even remember where the heck you were at, James. All I know is we got one guess and it was incorrect. So can you enlighten me? Where were you at last week?
I believe I was in Dallas last week. Yeah,
Okay.
I was in Dallas. No real rhyme or reason. It was the first stadium that popped in my mind that um, I hadn't done, and I was running behind last week, so I was like picking it up like literally right before the show. So
Hey, that's cool, man. I've heard Dallas is what is it, AT&T Stadium or something?
yeah,
Yeah, I've heard that place is pretty badass, man. I mean, it was like, $1 billion stadium or whatever, so I'm sure it's pretty nice. But uh, I'd like to get down there one day and check it out.
yeah, me too. I also I've heard Jerry Jones has been making a killing this week on the surge pricing for his natural gas company he owns because of the weather that's going on down there.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah, I heard I don't know if they declared a state of emergency or they need like emergency relief or whatever because they got that massive power outage. And yeah, I read a little bit about it. It sounds like a mess.
Yeah, I've heard this week that like some people like with the power coming back on, their power bills are going to be tens of thousands of dollars for the month.
Good luck paying that shit.
Yeah, no shit.
Crazy, crazy. All right, well, hey, why don't we kick it over to the recap for this past week? And I think probably the biggest news to come out just this other day, whenever the heck it was, is Carson Wentz trade has finally been consummated, long awaited. Everybody suspected this towards the end of the season when he got benched for Jalen Hurts. They're shipping him off to Indy, logical destination, connection with Frank Reich. I don't think Indy really had to give up a ton to get him, just a couple of picks. I know one of them's conditional, could go from a second to a first. I'm just hoping that Indy gets him some weapons because I'm not so sure T.Y. Hilton's really a wide receiver one anymore. And I know they got some younger guys working their way up, but you got your quarterback, you got a solid defense, great offensive line, stable of running backs. Get the guys some weapons and make your run, man. I think they can do it, dude. They could be a contender if they just fill in those last remaining pieces. What do you think?
Well, that and even without getting any real weapons for him, I mean, you have the better offensive line, you have the run game that they actually use. What's his name? Jonathan Taylor came on strong the end of the year last year. I mean, he just has to go in and manage the game, and that team's a contender.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I'm trying to think of where I saw it. It was probably on NFL.com. Some guy already has him as a top 10 quarterback just for making the move. And I think his argument was, hey, injuries drug that team down this past year. You put him on a team like Indy where you got one of the better offensive lines in the league, and he's going to get right back to peak form, uh, potentially right out of the gate here because of the familiarity with Frank Reich and that system. And so, could be pretty exciting stuff for those guys.
Yeah, and if you look at it at the end of 2019, he basically dragged that team to the playoffs. Like they had nobody, everybody was injured in 19 too, and he dragged that team to the playoffs, and I think they won the game too, if I remember. I don't recall, but like I mean, they won like their last like 4 or 5 games to make the playoffs with 90% of the roster injured. Not really 90%, but a bunch of key players injured.
Yeah, and we've seen it. We've seen when he's good, he's really good. And it was crazy to see this past year where, it's just like he couldn't get out of his own head or something because I know they had a lot of injuries, but there was time that guys were back in the mix and he still just couldn't get it together. But hey, good for them. They made the move. The next item that I caught this past week is that Tennessee is expressing interest in going after J.J. Watt. Man, obviously there's a connection between him and Vrabel from their time together in Houston. To me, it's a match made in heaven if they can pull it off. The problem is Tennessee doesn't really have shit for cap space, but
Yeah.
teams have been known to get creative in the past. And when you're dealing with a guy like Watt, who's near the end of his career, Tennessee's a clear playoff team. Maybe they can find a deal that's beneficial both ways. Something that's not going to break the bank, and it just. And I think one of the notes I had was just looking at a quick glance. They could shave 10 million right off the bat just from cutting Malcolm Butler. It's not like I'm not saying they should get rid of him because I liked him, especially when he had that sweet pick in the playoffs when he was with the Patriots. But I've heard a lot of guys just knock him that he's just not lived up to the contract. And if that's the case, that's some low hanging fruit to clear some path here for Watt to come in. And that defensive line, if that improves, it makes a lot of people in the secondary look better anyhow. And so it's kind of like, where do you want to put your priority?
Yeah, they have room to shave some cap space. I don't actually think he's going to end up in Tennessee. Like my dark horse candidate to get him, the more and more I thought about it, is Indianapolis. Like they seem to be starting to
Ooh,
go after it, and if Ballard's a smart guy, and he can
yeah.
get that price he wants for it. Look at the Wentz trade. Like Philadelphia kept trying to convince them that Chicago and these other teams were offering first round picks, and Ballard just said, okay, well they're giving you a first round pick, go for it.
Yeah,
This is
I,
our
I think
offer, and we're sticking to it.
Yeah, I think if he could go to Indy, we know they got the cap space. They're just like chuck full of cap space, which is incredible for them being as good of a playoff team as they are. Uh, so they can afford him. I want to say Justin Houston is a free agent. He's pretty long in the tooth. I mean, if Watt came in, you got him and Buckner on that line. Holy crap, man.
Hmm.
That would be sweet. I'm hoping that happens now that you said that.
Yeah, I was thinking about that this week. I think, let me see. Yeah, Houston's a free agent, and ooh, Autry's a free agent too.
Okay. Honestly, they're not in bad shape though. I think that there's a lot of teams envious of their position.
Yeah,
But I hope they make a run after a wide receiver, and we'll talk more about that later. But there's going to be some guys that are out there, and I think it'd be prudent because yeah, I'm just not sold on T.Y. Hilton anymore, man. I think he's in that decline phase of his career, and when you're this close to making a run, don't have don't have faith on the old dog if you don't need to. Go and get some other guys, some younger guys, maybe proven in their prime kind of guys, and put forth that best effort, is my opinion. Okay, so next up, another sad piece that came out this past week. Vincent Jackson passed away. I don't know all the details. I just I heard something about he was found in a hotel, and this is another tough one, man. He was a young guy, unlike Marty Schottenheimer, older guy, still sad, and kind of young. I think Schottenheimer was in his 70s, but Vincent Jackson, holy cow, man, 38 years old. Just tough, man. I liked him as a player, going back to his days with the Chargers. One of those big body guys. It's a mismatch nightmare. Just sad stuff, man.
Yeah, it is. And I had seen an article. I hadn't had time to read it, but apparently they're saying that he was in the hotel room for a couple of days before he was found.
Okay.
I just pulled the article up here.
Yeah, I heard there was a family member filed like a missing persons report, and I thought I saw something like the police spoke with him, and they thought he was okay, and then I'm not sure how much longer after that they found him, and I've not heard what exactly it was. If it was a drug thing, if it was some other kind of thing, but 38. I mean, that's
Yeah.
scary stuff, man. Sad stuff. But
Um,
yeah, while you're looking there, going to happier news, uh, a little bit of kicker love here. Jason Sanders getting a big contract extension in Miami, 5 years, 22 million. That's some monster money for a kicker, man. That puts him at number 4 on a per year basis. And some people might question that decision. I know there's a lot of people out there, they don't like paying for special teams, but I mean, I got to tell you, I like the move. When you look, especially in these recent years, there have been a handful of teams that have been drugged down by kicking mishaps. And, Sanders proved himself last year that he could handle it and make it work. And, you lock that guy in. And if the wheels fall off, hey, maybe you got to do something a year or two down the road. But he did enough to prove that it was a good move, in my opinion.
yeah, and well, look at was it the Baltimore Buffalo playoff game where you had
Yep.
all those kicking mishaps? Like, I mean, special teams is important. You have a good kicker, and that can when you so look at was it Chicago a couple years ago, the double doink with
Yeah. Yeah.
who was the kicker? Was it Gold
Um, no,
or
that
was it
I think that
Parkey?
was after gold. That was
Parkey?
yeah, I'd have to go back. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
But yeah,
but
I
I
mean,
mean,
it can take you down, man. It can take you down. And so, I'd spend some money on it. Okay, last thing I had on my list is talking about Big Ben for a minute here. So this is getting interesting in Pittsburgh, man. Roethlisberger has expressed his interest in coming back for 2021. The Steelers, however, are being non-committal, and I can understand why. There's a lot to look at with this team, and since we're doing some of the AFC stuff tonight, we'll talk more about them in a little bit. But Roethlisberger has a $41 million cap number, and they could free up around 20 million by moving on from him. He's coming off of a really solid campaign, but that playoff game, it's like a freaking thumb to the eye, man. Like everybody's looking back at that and saying, "What the heck?" And it's tough. I mean, it was a disaster. I mean, what do you have, like 4 picks and a fumble or something? I mean, it was just so ridiculous. But uh, you know, what are they going to do? I was looking at their list of free agents, and man, they got a lot of big name guys hanging out there, and they don't really have any cap space. And so, do you cut him and go with Mason Rudolph for a year, and hope that you've maintained enough of the pieces around it so you can still maybe make a playoff push? I don't know. It's getting dicey, man. But I do want to talk about Roethlisberger more later. He's going to be as part of my question of the week. Not to spoil anything there, but I don't know, man. What do you think of that stuff?
I don't know. It's tough. Like honestly, and we talked about it earlier in the season, or coming into the season. I wish that Pittsburgh had addressed the backup quarterback spot last year.
Hmm.
Um, Last year was the year to do it. Um, Obviously, we'll get in more to this, but I think they're, the best thing that could have happened for Pittsburgh was if Roethlisberger retired.
Yeah, I think you're right. It would have forced him to do something, and it would have been done in a more like amicable way because it's like, oh, hey, I'm bowing out, I'm retiring, and they don't have to kind of force him out by cutting him or doing something different like that. So uh, it's interesting, man. It's interesting because I mean, geez, if they released him, they're saving 20 million, which helps them. When you look at their list of free agents, I mean, everybody and their mom is up this year. And I don't know. I'm nervous that Pittsburgh, no matter what they do, is going to be a step down in terms of talent next year. They're in trouble, man. And I know teams
Yeah,
get creative with the way that they extend guys and they do things. I just think that they have way too many key guys that are in flux right now. Next year, I'm going to be tempering my expectations with the Steelers.
yeah. As I was coming into this year, I thought where they're probably going to be next year was where they were going to be this year going in. But
Okay.
I mean, also with Tomlin, I mean, they just whoever's there, they seem to win. One of the things they could also do is, I mean, I hate to say it, but I think they need to cut Ebron.
Oh yeah, let him go. They don't even highlight the tight end in that offense anyhow. I mean, yeah, he had some good stats here and there, but I mean, and I know I'm looking back just at Roethlisberger's time, but Roethlisberger has never really been a big guy throwing to the tight end, and so you don't need to put a lot of money in that position.
Yeah, I mean, and right there they could save another 6 million. Like that's why I say with like J.J. Watt, that everyone says, oh well, he's probably going to pitch. How?
Yeah, he can't go to Pittsburgh. There's no way. And we'll talk more about it in a bit too when we get to them. But I know Pittsburgh wants very badly to hang on to Bud Dupree. I'm just not sure where they're going to come up with the room. They're going to have to get really creative, man. And if they hang on to him, they're basically saying, hey, we're going to let XYZ other guy go too. And
Hmm.
like Juju Smith-Schuster, he's on that list. I don't think he's back in Pittsburgh, and I don't even think that matters for them because these guys just like seem to find wide receivers out of like every draft class that turn out to be like stud guys. And so, okay, let him go, no big deal. But then you got James Conner, same thing. I'd probably let him go, but you got to talk about it because you're going to need to find another running back. And there's other guys on the defense. They got what's his name? I'm drawing a blank. I have it in my notes for later on, but one of their cornerbacks. I know they want to hang on to this guy. It's going to be tough, man. It just they've got a lot of hard decisions to make this year.
Yeah, they do, and it's just it's they have well Juju Smith-Schuster. I don't think even if they had the cap space to resign him, I don't think he was going to come back. I think it's best for the team that they let him go. He's kind of turning into the Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell head case where he's too interested in dancing on TikTok before the game than actually playing the
Yeah,
game.
yeah. He's
But
not a fit for that team.
yeah, outside of that, I mean, they have a lot of a lot of players that seem to be key, but they're getting older. That are free agents. With you mentioned James Conner, I don't think James Conner is a good running back. I think he's mediocre. He's a great seems to be a great person, great story, but I don't think he. I thought they had to get a new running back in the last year coming in. I just
I
didn't think he was
Yeah,
that
I no,
good.
I agree. I was just basically pulling for another one of these free agents that they got to keep an eye on. It's what are you going to do because you're gonna if you don't bring them back, you're going to have to get a running back. And yeah, they've been avoiding doing that for a little while now. But yeah, here I'm actually just pulling it up right now, so I got my notes and I can talk more intelligently about it. So well, if it'll let me get there anyhow. Let's try this again. Well, while I'm waiting on that, I'll just skim down here. So yeah, like looking at Pittsburgh, uh, Mike Hilton. That's the guy I was thinking of. Their cornerback, Mike Hilton. I know they want to
Yeah,
hang on to him. And then even at linebacker, Avery Williamson, man, that guy was freaking highly productive for them this past year. He's only got a rating of 90, I mean, a rating of 80 on lineups. And so, you know, if you got to make a sacrifice, doesn't mean lineups know everything, but they're going to have to make some sacrifices, man. I mean, these guys are sitting at 30 million over the cap. And so you cut Roethlisberger, you cut Ebron, and you're still 4 million over the cap. I think it's going to be tough for them to hang on to some of these guys. I just don't see how this team is anywhere near the level they were this year with talent. And you know, you're right. Tomlin's been good at getting these guys to play no matter what. I can't count on them repeating what they did this year. Alejandro Villanueva, he's another guy. He's been a key piece of that offensive line for a long time.
Where'd you get the 30 million number from? Because I have it as a lot less.
Oh, so this was my over the cap spreadsheet that we were referencing, I think a week ago. And yeah, I think your SPO-Track or whatever was about 5 million more favorable.
Well, because with Pouncey's retirement and Vance McDonald retiring, that saved them almost 13.5 million.
Oh, well, hey, maybe over the cap's not updated it yet. That could be a factor. So yeah, like let's just see. I'm pulling up over the cap right now in case it's changed since I made my notes. Well, it's changed a little bit. They're showing them 26 million over the cap. And so they did make a change since I looked at this before, but still, you know, maybe they got to make some more based off of what you're talking about. So, I mean, hey, even at, you know, at 26, you shed Roethlisberger and Ebron, you're back to even. And so then you got to restructure some guys and you got to do some things, and they're still going to be scrambled, man.
Yeah, they're still going to be scrambling. I mean, Roethlisberger's the key. You cut based on the numbers I have, you cut Roethlisberger and you have about 5 million in room.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, so anything else big from this past week, news-wise, that you want to touch on?
Yeah, it happened today, and I thought you were going to hit it right after the Carson Wentz trade, but Philadelphia cut Jackson.
Mm, you're talking to Sean Jackson?
Yeah, they cut him or released him
I don't
this
know
afternoon.
how big of a deal that is, man. This guy's been nothing but injured for freaking 7 years, man.
Yeah, he's been nothing but injured. But I think if I remember the number was right, like it saved them a lot of money on the cap and brought them down a little further, closer to what the projected cap is or what their projected cap space is. I mean, Philadelphia's just fucked on the cap.
Yeah, I'm showing over the cap has him at 43 million over, but I'm almost certain that that doesn't reflect what they did with Wentz or Deshaun Jackson. And so that number will change, but yeah, it just goes to show that I mean they're 31st. You know, the only other team that's worse is the Saints, which is at 69.5 million. It's nuts. But to be 43 million over is nuts. It's like, dude, I don't know how you make that work. You got to have a smart motherfucker working those numbers, man.
Yeah, SpoTrack has them, and this reflects the Jackson cut. So it
Okay.
has and the Wentz trade. It has them at 37 million over. So I mean, it's better. I mean, I don't know. Like, you go through their roster and where can they save money? Like, we talked about it a little last week. Like, half the players that half their high priced players, you cut them, they're going to cost you more.
Yeah, you're going to take a dead cap hit worth just as much or more of their cap number, so you can't really do it. Yeah.
Yeah, like Darius Slay, his cap hits this year is like 16 million. They cut him, it's 22.
Yep. Can't touch him.
So you just go down the line. Lane Johnson, cap hit this year is 18 million. You cut him, it's 40.
Well, yeah, he's obviously a key cog. They're hanging on to him, but yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, it just how they got themselves into that position just blows my mind. And I know the COVID year's putting more stress on teams because the cap number's coming down, but I mean, them and the Saints, they got way ahead of themselves. That's pretty clear.
Yeah, like the only players that like really like I can't combine. I've tried. I tried to go through it. Okay, you cut this player, you cut this player, and I can't find a reasonable scenario where they get under the cap number.
Yeah, they're going to have to do a lot of like restructured deals and find a way to like push some of the money around and because yeah, they won't be able to do it just from cutting guys. There's no way.
Yeah.
All right, well, hey man, anything else on the news from this past week?
No, that was it. It was just the Deshaun Jackson cut, which
Cool.
I thought was interesting because that happened that materialized really quickly.
Yeah.
It was like earlier today or this morning I heard it was like rumored that there was some sort of rift or they were, and then all of a sudden this afternoon he was cut. It was like, where'd this where'd this go? Where'd this come from?
Hey man, he's a little bit long in the tooth for, you look at his lack of production because he's been injured every year. I, you just can't trust him. You got to move on, clear the way for the next guy. Don't even mess with it. It just they're going with a clean slate is what they're doing, and so I'm good with all that.
Yeah. Oh, the other thing, the Carolina. I think Carolina is going to be making a huge push at Watson. They cut a couple players
Yeah,
today or yesterday. They cut three players to create another 30 million almost of cap space.
yeah. Well, I have an interesting thought for them as well, but I'm going to save it for the question of the week.
Yeah, that's fine. That was just the cap space where they see Carolina created a little bit more room. I think they were well under anyways,
Okay. Yeah, I think
but
they were in a good spot. Yeah, yeah. I'd have to look them up, but yeah, I think let's see. I mean, over the cap, you know, 23.5 million roughly. They're in a good spot. They're in the top 10. They got
yeah.
some room to play. Okay, well here, let's move it on here. So tonight we're going to be making some franchise tag predictions. Maybe they're not necessarily predictions, but kind of going through the teams in the AFC and saying, hey, if they were going to use the franchise tag, these are probably, the couple of guys that they would prioritize if it came down to it. And so, you just got to keep in mind it's way early. There's a lot of time for teams to either cut guys or sign them to longer term deals, restructure contracts, make all sorts of cap space room, trade people. All sorts of craziness could happen. And so some of these names, they're going to get locked in without the franchise tag. But I just thought it would be cool to kind of take an early look and see what's to come. And before we dig into it, I just want to run through some numbers here as a point of reference. These were the franchise tag values by position for 2020, and there might be something updated for what 2021 is going to look like, but this is what I found, and so I'm going off of it.
So I
Quarterback,
actually, instead of going off of that, if I can get this page to reload, I have the actual projected numbers
2021
for
numbers.
this year for 2021 according to Spotrac, I believe.
Well,
So,
then, you are the ninja. I will let you run through the list of positions and values.
all right. So it was projections at Spotrac and Pro Football Focus. My screen's doing some crazy shit on me, so hold
That's
on.
fine. While you're looking it up, I'll give you another point of reference for anybody who's watching. I
Got it.
don't have a ton of historical figures, but I did look up last year. There were 14 guys tagged last year, which seemed high to me, man. That's almost half the freaking league used a
Hmm.
franchise tag last year. But typically they use it as a way of locking them in while they can negotiate that long-term deal. Nowhere near that 14 number ended up playing on the tag, but it's just a point of reference that as you're going through this, basically you could kind of say in your head, yeah, possibly every other team could at least use it to lock a guy in until they sign him long term.
All right, so the franchise tag, and it's based on $180 million salary cap for this coming year, which is what the league said the floor was going to be. The franchise tag is the average of the top 5 players' cap percentage at the position for 2020, or 120% of the player's previous year's salary. So for quarterback, I have it at 24.8 million this year. Offensive line, 13.6 million. Running back, 8.5 million. Wide receiver, 15.8 million. Tight end, 9.5. Cornerback, 14.9. Defensive end, 15.9. Defensive tackle, 13.7. Linebacker, 14.6. And punter or kicker, 4.4.
Yeah, those numbers came down quite a bit from 2020, and I'm sure
Yeah,
it's because of the COVID cap situation, but still kind of high. Like when you think about a cornerback, I mean, that guy better be a lockdown guy. Otherwise, you're talking about potentially letting him walk because that's a huge hit on your cap if you can't sign him to a long-term deal.
right, exactly. And for some of the players, like which we'll get into next week with, if the Cowboys were to tag Dak, his would be 120% of the previous year's salary. So it
Yeah,
wouldn't
because he
be
was
that.
tagged already. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because last year he made over what the projected cap is for this year.
hmm Yeah, that's an interesting one. Okay, well, hey, he's NFC, so we'll be talking about him next week. But
Yeah.
I do have him as part of my question of the week, though. So we're going to talk about him tonight. Uh, all right, so let's go through the teams. I did this alphabetically for all the teams in the AFC, and I used the over the cap numbers here, and so you can correct me for stuff that's a little bit different. But starting off with the Baltimore Ravens, I'm showing that they're sitting at 13th in available cap space with 18 million. And when I go through and basically compare their list of free agents, which I got from Spotrac, and then the ratings of those free agents, which I got from lineups, what I found is that basically their defensive end slash linebacker, edge guy, whatever you want to call him, Matt Judon is the no-brainer pick here. If this team's got to use a franchise tag, he's an impact player on that defense. He's their highest rated free agent with an 85. But I will say this. They've got 9 other players on their roster that have a higher rating than him. And so no matter what they do, they're in good shape. Baltimore, probably one of the better teams in the league when it comes to consistently finding talent and retaining that talent. And so, whether it's him or not, who knows? The only other guy that I really thought was appealing was Yannick Ngakoue because they traded for him. And he's got a rating of 80, which really is, in my opinion, getting onto the lower end of the scale. Maybe not a guy that's worth franchise tagging, but I put him on here because obviously he was valuable to them last year. And then just kind of because of their offensive line situation, I've heard people talking about DJ Fluker, but you're getting down into the 70s. He's rated as a 76 on lineups. And so, my opinion, if it comes down to it, Judon's the guy. If they're even in a position where they need to use it, but this is a team that they've been good at working these deals with their talent, and so they may not need to use a franchise tag. That
So
is, yes, go
what did
ahead.
what did you have his like if they franchised Judon? What did you have it at?
Well, so he's depending on what source you go with. Some have him listed as defensive end, and some have him listed at linebacker. And so, you'd have to kind of figure out which one does he fall in. Maybe go with the higher of the two just to be safe for our purposes. But, the team, I don't know how the team decides that stuff. They say, you're a defensive end. You're a linebacker.
Right, but what was the franchise tag value you had?
Oh, so you're talking about for a linebacker, the 2020 value that I had?
Yeah, because you got to remember that Judon was franchise tagged last year as well. So this
Oh
would be
yeah,
his second
yeah. So
straight second straight year.
I didn't slap a number to it. I just basically took the number
Ah,
by position as just a point of reference, and then I just looked for players that they would consider using that on. And with them having 18 million in space, whether his cap number is higher or lower than that, they've got enough to work with that they could find a way to finagle it by restructuring other guys or cutting people or doing what they got to do. All I was saying is that they're in a position that if they had to tag a guy, they could tag a guy, and he's the most likely guy that they would do it to.
yeah, I would I would tag him as well. Couple things with Baltimore is like Ngakwe is an option, but I don't think Ngakwe did lived
He
up
didn't light
to
the world on fire, man. Yeah. So I
exactly.
don't think yeah.
And like I have Baltimore at 26 million in cap space. Um, Judon would cost around 20 million because it's second year franchise tag whatever. So that makes the most sense. I don't think making working a long term deal with like Judon or even Ngakwe would make sense right now because you got to look forward because you're going to have to extend Lamar if he's like you're saying they're saying he's their quarterback of their future, which he better well be as as well as he's been playing. Maybe just regular season playoffs he has to step it up a little bit. So they're going to have to work out a long term extension, and you're looking at 30 plus million a year for that. So a long term deal for Judon and Ngakwe right now wouldn't make sense until after you got done with what you're gonna be paying Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's really the highest priority for them is getting Jackson locked in. And what they do with him could affect the cap space significantly. And then maybe at that point they're really not in a position to tag Judon blah, blah, at that point anymore.
Yeah,
Okay, next up I got the Buffalo Bills. And so over the cap had them at 20th in cap space. They were 1 million over. Obviously, not a good start here. But they've got a lot of solid guys locked in, so it's not the end of the world for them. In this one, honestly, when I went through the list, their highest rated free agent is cornerback Josh Norman. I don't see them tagging him. He's got an 81 rating, and realistically, he's in the decline phase of his career. And then obviously the tag number for a cornerback is high. I mean, my number was, well, I don't know, 14 or 16 million or something. Yours is obviously a little bit lower because you got the updated number, but still way too high for a guy like Josh Norman.
yeah,
Surprisingly, the second highest guy I had on the list was their punter. And it's not unheard of, but it's super rare. And their punter has an 80 rating. Corey, I don't know. I'll just say Corey B. I'll let you try to pronounce his last name. Uh, I value special teams. I'm just not sure that I could value it that much when the team is already over the cap. And then I've also heard guys like linebacker Trent Murphy and their guard John Feliciano have been named, but both are lower rated players. They've got 70 ratings. I just don't know that you want to slap somebody with the tag if their rating's that low. And lineups isn't everything. But my opinion is that more than likely, they don't use the tag this year, and that's fine because they have enough pieces under contract to basically keep running at the level that they've been running at. and probably even getting better because they're going to bring back a lot of the guys from this past year's team. So, what are you seeing, homie?
So I agree with you. Josh Norman, like when I went through it, Josh Norman's not worth the value. One player that you didn't mention was Darrell Williams, their tackle.
Yeah, let me see what's going on there. I'm wondering what lineups has him rated at. If he was in the 70s or something, maybe that's why.
But while you're looking it up,
Yeah, yeah.
I think keeping Williams and Feliciano, I mean that should be a priority for the team because that offensive line did pretty well last year, and keeping that offensive line together would the cohesiveness, and we talked about it previously, the cohesiveness of having an offensive line and having an offensive line that's played together for a while and being consistent is important in protecting the quarterback. So that's the one player I looked at was Darrell Williams as possible target for the franchise tag this year.
Okie dokie. So I'm just pulling it up right now, and the reason that I did not have him. Oh, hang on. I gotta sort this. The reason I did not have him is because he's not as high as John Feliciano rating wise, but that doesn't mean anything. I mean, that's just one point of reference. And in fact, I mean, lineups has him at a 73. And so I didn't go down that far because I just kind of thought, you start getting into the low 70s. Do you really want to tag a guy at that level? Maybe you do, if you can't sign him to a here's the thing. I agree with what you're saying. You want to keep the guy and you want to sign him to a deal. I just don't think you want to franchise tag him.
Yeah, which makes sense. Like I understand that, but though I look at the offensive tackle position, either left or right, as
It's high
being
priority. Yeah.
very high priority. And with a quarterback like Josh Allen and how Josh Allen plays, yeah, he's elusive, but you need to have that protection there because if he starts getting hit, he's gonna start to struggle.
Mm-hmm. So protect his ass is what you're saying.
Exactly.
If you got to tag the guy, tag the guy.
Yeah, and Williams I mean, he's second team All Pro in 2017. I mean, that's not that bad as I look at it. I mean, minimal penalties, total 6 penalties, and started all 16 games for Buffalo. That he played 973, 96% of the offensive snaps.
Yeah, hey, he got it done. So I got you. You made the case. So he is now on the list. That's what this all boils down to. All right, moving on. The next team I got is Cincinnati, the good old Bengals. So over the cap had them 6 in cap space with 37.7 million available. We know they need offensive line help in a major way. They don't really have any big offensive line free agents hanging out there that I saw that were really worth hanging on to. I'm thinking they're going to definitely use some of that money in free agency to shore up the offensive line. Looking at my comparison here with Spotrac and lineups, their highest priority free agent appears to be cornerback William Jackson. He's rated at 82, and we know that this is a team that's had kind of like some streakiness in that secondary. They've had a lot of turnover. They've not really landed on some guys. I think a guy rated 82, it's a tough pill to swallow at that position for the tag because the number's so high. The next guy up I saw was defensive end / linebacker Carl Lewis. He's got an 81 rating. Honestly, I'm not really thrilled with either of those options. I think you try to work a deal with them, and if you can't, you let them go and you find the next best guy in free agency. And they got a lot of money, so they could be big players in free agency this year.
Yeah, they have a lot of money. I struggled to find somebody that was worthwhile to franchise tag. Like, I mean, both three-quarters of their secondaries free agents, but I don't think it's that big a deal. I thought their secondary left a little bit to be desired last year, and they need improvement
Yeah.
anyways. So you might as well try to improve it and not waste the money on the franchise tag for those players. You have AJ Green, but he's not coming back.
No way. Yeah, you
I
can't
mean,
tag AJ Green. I mean,
yeah.
especially because, they got Tyler Boyd, solid. T. Higgins looks solid
Hmm.
for a rookie. I mean, AJ Green's gone. Plus, everybody's saying that this is going to be another strong wide receiver class in the draft. And so, yeah,
Exactly. I mean, there's just there's just, there's not nobody that's worthwhile for them to place the franchise tag.
I'm with you. So next up, that brings us to the Cleveland Browns. I'm showing them 10th in cap space with 20.2 million. And I guess I just got to start off when I look at these guys. Whether you liked John Dorsey or not, and I know that he's been gone for a little while now, but he laid a lot of the groundwork for them to get into this position where they have cornerstone pieces on both sides of the ball, and that they cleaned up their mess of a cap. And honestly, you look at this team, they made the playoffs. They got a solid cap spot here. Uh, you know, they've got a legitimate chance to continue from where they left off. And I'm showing defensive end Olivier Vernon is their top rated free agent by far. He's got an 87 rating on lineups. But my hesitancy with him is at age 31, I'm just not sure that he's an ideal franchise tag candidate. And so, I think on top of that, I heard that they're in the J.J. Watt running. And I think that they could attract him because they were in the playoffs. And I mean, geez, just imagine the line with Miles Garrett and J.J. Watt. I mean, that's just, this team's getting dangerous fast.
Hmm.
But whether that happens or not remains to be seen. The next guy down I had was defensive tackle Larry Ogunjobi. He's got an 80 rating. Defensive tackle and 80 rating is actually pretty decent, but is it franchise tag good? I don't know. I wouldn't do it. And so, this team, they've got some cap space to play with. I would just expect them to use it in free agency. I don't expect them to use the tag.
Yeah, I thought about Ogunjobi as a possible target for the franchise tag, but the more I looked at it, I thought he was okay last year. I didn't think he was worth the franchise tag, so I went the same with you and couldn't find anyone that would be worthwhile to franchise tag and spend that money. They have other holes that they need to plug.
Definitely. And this is a team that, here's my one thing, and I mean, take it for however you want, but they made the playoffs. They had a great first year with a new rookie head coach, and everything worked out for them. Minus like OBJ, they really didn't have a lot of injury issues on that team, and that was one of my concerns last year was that if they got hit by the injury bug, they could be in trouble because they didn't have a lot of depth. And so I think they used some of this cap space, build that depth chart, and you don't have to go and get a big name guy if you don't want to. I mean, if you could get a guy like JJ Watt, I think yeah, you max out your cap space and you get a guy like JJ Watt. But if you can't get a guy like JJ Watt, stack in some of these guys that are a little bit under the radar, that they're going to be high value, high production backups if you need them for depth, whatever. And that way you've got kind of like a little bit of a security blanket because next year they might not be as lucky with injuries like they were this past year.
Yeah, exactly. And plus, you mentioned the OBJ injury. I thought the team played better I mean, you hate to say it, but after OBJ went down, I thought Baker Mayfield looked a lot better because he wasn't focusing on trying to get the ball, force the ball into OBJ, and was able to play more of open and not worried about what OBJ is going to
Yeah.
do because he's not getting the ball.
Yeah, I was using him as a point of reference that other than him, they didn't really have too many injuries. But you're right, his injury was really probably a good thing for that offense. Other people, I would be concerned. But yeah, and hey, we'll see what happens with OBJ. So,
Yeah.
it sounds like they're listening for any team that wants to take him. So, all right. Next up, I got the Denver Broncos, showing them as seventh in cap space with 31.1 million. This is one of these ones that, in my opinion, at least, it's an obvious choice. Safety Justin Simmons. He's got a 90 rating. Key piece of that defense. Vic Fangio is coming back as head coach, unless I'm having some kind of a brain fart here. Defensive minded head coach. You got to hang on to a guy like Simmons. The next guy on the list is running back Philip Lindsay. I just don't think you can franchise tag a guy like Philip Lindsay when you're paying Melvin Gordon to be your running back one. To me, it's as simple as Simmons or bust for the Broncos. If they can sign him to a deal and they don't need to tag him, then I don't think they got to worry about using the tag at all this year.
So a couple things about Denver is I had like three people that I kind of looked at for them. I didn't even consider the Philip Lindsay as a prominent free agent, especially with having Melvin Gordon and that you can let Philip Lindsay go. I had Justin Simmons, Shelby Harris, and DeMar Dotson.
Okay.
And ultimately, what it boiled down to was, would they have a lot of cap space? I think they could take a run at JJ Watt also, and that kind of shore up that defense because you they need a quarterback as it is, but that defense is solid. You don't have to make much tweaks to it, so just keep it together and franchise tag Simmons.
Sweet, sweet. I was just kind of looking through the lineups on them. Yeah, see, and this is just one piece of information. They've got Shelby Harris sitting at 77, and then they got Dotson at 71. I will say this, they need help on the offensive line. And, however you're going to get it. And hey, lineups, they're not the be all end all. We already talked about that. But yeah, no, I mean, hey, they've got some options. They definitely have some options. I think Simmons is the top dog, but yeah, they could, if they needed to, they could do some other things. Yeah. Okay, next up, I got the Houston Texans, and I'm showing them at 17th in cap space with 5.9 million. Will Fuller, wide receiver, he's their top-rated guy, sitting at 87 overall on lineups. I get it. He had, in past years, some injury concerns. And then in most recent times, he's had that suspension issue. This one's interesting because the team needs to make amends with their franchise quarterback. And so, based off of that, I would say, hey, do whatever it takes to bring Fuller back. But they do have limited cap space. And so it may not be feasible. When I go through the roster, I'm not really seeing a ton other like feasible, like realistic kind of guys that you would think about. And so, to me, it seems like it's Will Fuller or nothing at all. I think it's more like nothing at all because they just don't have the room to tag him. They're going to be banking on a longer term deal with like a lower cap number for this year, in my opinion, and if they can even hang on to him.
Okay, so for Houston, I agree with you. It's Will Fuller or nothing at all. Couple things about them is I have them closer to 9 million of open cap space. Um, David Johnson's been basically a bust there. You can cut him, but you don't need both David Johnson and
Duke
Duke
Johnson.
Johnsons. So you cut one of the two, you save somewhere between $5 and $7 million on your cap space, which then that gets you to 16. And I mean, you're getting closer and closer to that actually that gives you enough cap space to franchise tag Will Fuller because you need 15.8 approximately.
Okay.
So I would try to work out a long-term deal with Will Fuller. If you can't, even as it is, try to work it out before the start of the year, before you have to announce the franchise tag. If you can't work out the long-term contract, I definitely would franchise tag Will Fuller. He's good enough. He's not. He has had the injury problems and he had the suspension, but if he could get it all together, he can be solid in that offense. Plus, if you're trading Watson, you're going to need. If you do trade Watson, you're going to need some targets for the new quarterback to throw to.
Yeah, and I think they're hoping to hang on to Watson, and I think he had pretty good chemistry with Will Fuller. I think obviously he's the best they got at this point. So, most consistent at least. So yeah, they should try and make it happen if they can. Okay, next up I got the Indianapolis Colts. I'm showing them sitting at fourth in cap space with 43.6 million, and kind of like what we were talking about earlier with Philly. Because I'm using over the cap, I'm suspecting that this number needs to be adjusted to account for the Wentz trade. But nonetheless, this is a legitimate playoff team. These guys are in phenomenal shape from a cap perspective. When I went through their list, running back Marlon Mack was their top-rated free agent, sitting at 82 overall. I just don't see why they would even mess with bringing him back unless they could get him for a good deal, because Jonathan Taylor's the clear number one. And then on top of that, you got Nyheim Hines is your receiving back, kind of like your change of pace guy. And then even behind that, you got Wilkins. And so I just don't see anything happening with Mack. After that, they've got Justin Houston, defensive end / linebacker, edge guy. I think he plays just defensive end there. But, he's in the decline phase of his career. Highly unlikely that they would tag him. The same kind of thing applies to cornerback Xavier Rhodes. And then you start getting down to guys that are in those 70 level ratings, which includes T.Y. Hilton. And so, which I'm not a big fan of. I don't think you stretched it to hang on to that guy. And so, I want to see this team use some of this cap space to go out and get a wide receiver for Wentz. I know that they've got, Michael Pittman Jr. is the up-and-coming young guy. He had a pretty good rookie year. But honestly, I'd like to see him go after, if Chicago's really going to do a tag and trade with Allen Robinson, take a look at him. If the Lions do a tag and trade with Kenny Golladay, which, it sounds like the news you're hearing is they want to keep him, but let's just say they were open to it, I'd take a look at him. And then if not, we just heard Marvin Jones wants to chase a contender. Okay, Go out and get him in free agency. All I'm saying is they need a true wide receiver one, and I think Allen Robinson's that guy. If you can't get him, you'll look at some of these other guys that I just mentioned and whoever else might be out there. And hey, throw a dart at one of these rookies in the draft, but get a proven guy, because you're a team built to win now, and you need to have that proven guy now while those younger guys develop. And so, I don't know, just kind of based on my assessment of the roster, I don't see them tagging anybody, but that's okay because they've got plenty of cap space to, nail some guys in free agency and really work these trades like they've been working them. So,
yeah, I had them at 40, almost 45 million after the Wentz trade. So I mean, they still have solid cap space for that. I had them at a ridiculous number before the Wentz trade, so my numbers may be off somewhere, but I agree with you. I don't think you tag anyone here. I think that, yeah, Justin Houston, would it be nice to bring him back? Yeah. Is he worth a franchise tag? Maybe not. I think they go. Yeah, I think they go after wide receivers with their cap space, and they go after J.J. Watt. And with going after J.J. Watt, this team is built to win now.
Yeah.
Carson
Yeah.
Wentz just shows a little bit of what he showed in the past, not 2020, but previously. This team is a clear Super Bowl contender. I think that's going to be a huge selling point for J.J. Watt because of the fact that that's what's missing for J.J. Watt is the Super Bowl. He's had a solid career, and I think with Houston, if you sign J.J. Watt, you don't need Houston, or you may not need Autry. I mean Xavier Rhodes didn't show enough. There's nothing here to tag, and no point in tagging anyone.
No. Just because you got a lot of money doesn't mean you should spend it. But man, I do like what you're saying about J.J. Watt. That would probably make them my favorite team going into next year. It would be they'd be a team that I would be watching all the time. Okay, next up I got the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I'm showing them sitting at the top of the list, first in cap space, 77.6 million according to Over the Cap, and no freaking wonder Urban Meyer took that job. He's got the number one pick where he can land his future, quarterback of the future, franchise quarterback. And he's got so much freaking money that he can pretty much do whatever the heck he wants in free agency if he so chooses to kind of hit the ground running with his guys. And going through the roster, really the only guy I saw on here that you could even think of was Sidney Jones at cornerback, and it's really not even good enough, man. He's got a 78 rating, so it's highly unlikely. And so unless I missed something in there when I was digging through this roster and looking at the ratings, I think that they're just going to be either splurging in free agency, or they're going to be maybe making some trades, or who knows what, or maybe just kind of holding back and playing it slow until next year when they can better scout and make some moves. But I just don't see them tagging anybody, man. But they have an abundance of cash, so if they wanted to, what the heck? And if they were going to, I guess I would say Sidney Jones would be probably the top priority, but I don't think it's going to happen.
So they're going to have a rookie quarterback next year. It's going to be Justin Fields. What did you have Cam Robinson rated as?
I will tell you in just a moment.
Because I think again this goes down to the offensive line and having that cohesiveness. And Cam Robinson's left tackle. Would you want to go out and find a new left tackle to protect for your rookie quarterback?
So I would say based on that, I would bet he was in the 70s, which is why I didn't look at him. But you're right. He has played strong enough to hang on to. So I got him at 78 overall. But the thing I like about him, he's a big-bodied guy, 6'6", 320 pounds. And he's still, if I'm reading this right, he's still only 25 years old. And so, yeah, he's, I think, a prime franchise tag candidate. I'm glad you brought him up.
Yeah, he was the only one that I could see that would be worthwhile on this roster, especially as young as he is, as he's just going to progress better, and that's the position you need. Yeah, it's going to be a huge amount of money to franchise tag him, but if you can't work out a long-term deal, I would put that tag on him today if I knew I was going to get a long-term deal.
Yeah, you've got an abundance of cap space, and you're right. You got to protect your rookie quarterback. I think it's money well spent. And honestly, it's the kind of situation you want if you're going to use the tag. You're getting an up-and-coming player. You don't want to tag a guy like we talked about with Justin Houston, a guy who at any given time could be retiring because he's kind of at the end of his line. Those are guys that are in the decline phase. You don't want to tag those guys if you don't have to, but there's always, a time and a place, and sometimes that happens. Yeah, so I'd be totally cool if they tag Cam Robinson, man. Okay, next up, I got the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm showing them 28th in cap space, with them being over by 23.1 million. And my research had wide receiver Sammy Watkins is their highest rated free agent player with an 84 overall. After him was running back Le'Veon Bell at an 83 overall. And for both of those guys, I just don't see it. I mean, they've got such an abundance at the skill players that, and they're already so far over the cap. You can't drop a ton of money on one of these backup skill players. Just my opinion. What do you see in there, man?
So I'm sorry, the wife texted me, so I was making sure it wasn't anything important. There's spots where they can save money. Like, I mean, they have to have some players they can cut. Like, unfortunately, Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz are probably on their way out. They have a lot of key-ish free agents. I might consider tagging Watkins. I would consider it just because of that role. Him or maybe Robinson, but I mean that wide receiver, the role they both have played for Kansas City in the last couple of years has been pivotal in that offense.
Yeah, I will say this, and I don't have the stats in front of me, but I do remember last year there was something on NFL Network or wherever the heck it was that I saw it or read it that talked about their offense is significantly better when Sammy Watkins is in the lineup. And so, I don't know, is it franchise tag worthy? Not to me when you're already that far over the cap, but if you could find a way to make it work, what the heck, man? Give it a rip.
Yeah, exactly. I think that Sammy Watkins might be the only player that I would even consider if you can make it work.
Yeah. And you know what? Honestly, if I'm Kansas City and I'm Andy Reid, I'd probably just sit down with Watkins and say, hey, man, we paid you a shitload of money for the amount of production we got out of you. And it was good for what we needed. But come on, let's find a good deal. Franchise tag's not going to work. Let's find a good number, and see, because if you're Sammy Watkins, you know that you've been paid handsomely by these guys. They brought him in at a big number, and you know that if you take a little bit of a discount for them, you're on a potential Super Bowl contender. And I think maybe that's important to him. And I don't know him personally, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what
Yeah, and
happens.
a couple things that Kansas City could do is, as I look at their current contract, is like if you look at Chris Jones carries a $20 million roster bonus for 2021. Obviously, you're not going to cut him because he's a key component on the defense, but you restructure that contract a little bit, you could save, I don't know what, $10 million, $12 million on the cap. Tyrann Mathieu, he's at $15 million almost this year. It's the last year of his deal. You work out an extension with him. You could reduce your cap hit a little bit there. So there's some wiggle room also they have with the players that they have on their roster or signed for at least 2021 that to reduce that cap number to be able to have the
Get
room
some
for
relief.
get some relief from the salary cap, or even sign some of these other players. Like, well, Fisher's going to be out for 2021. Like, restructure Schwartz or do something with not restructure Schwartz. Sorry, do something with their offensive line or sign some of these wide receivers to the Sammy Watkins or Demarcus Robinson instead of having to use the salary cap on them.
Gotcha. Good assessment. Okay, next up we got the Las Vegas Raiders, and I'm showing them at 25th in cap space, over by 18.7 million. This is another one of these ones where I'm not totally sold for a combination of reasons. Their cap situation puts them in a bind, but their highest rated free agent player is Jonathan Hankins, defensive end. I actually like him. I just don't know that that rating is worth the franchise tag. The guy that I think people are talking about that's getting some buzz, I don't know how they're going to do it. They're going to have to get creative. Is wide receiver Nelson Aguilar. You know, it's crazy because that guy was hot and then not in Philadelphia. But this guy came on super strong last year and was a major difference maker for that offense. But can you use the tag? I think that's the problem. In my opinion, they're not going to be able to use it because the cap is just way too upside down. But you know, if you do some digging like you just did with Kansas City, you know, there's always ways that you can kind of finagle and do things. And so if Nelson Aguilar's the guy, you know, where there's a will, there's a way. They might be able to do it.
Okay, so with Vegas, I think they tag Aguilar based on what I'm hearing. There's a couple things that they can do. I have them at 13 million over the cap. They're looking to trade Mariota, which if they're able to trade Mariota, that saves them almost 12 million right there. It's
Nice.
11.3 million. You could cut incognito, save almost $7 million. You
Ooh,
could you
I
you
don't
have
think Gruden's cutting him though, man.
you have Gabe Jackson, who could save $10 million. That offensive line needed help last year, as it was. You have Lamarcus Joyner. You could cut, save almost $9 million. There's room there to be able to get that number down below what you need for to be able to put the franchise tag on Aguilar. But what I'm seeing in Vegas is you need number one, you need the offensive line to protect Carr better, or whoever their quarterback is next year, and also you need the weapons or talent of the wide receiver. What's his name? Riggins,
Ruggs, Henry Ruggs.
Ruggs, Henry Ruggs. He looked he he looked terrible last year. That looked like a wasted pick.
So
Um,
let me just step in for a second, and you know, not to interrupt you, but you know, my opinion of their offensive line. I know that they're super expensive when you look at them in whole. Uh, they're fucking badass, man. The problem is last year they were one of these teams where like that COVID bug like kept hitting that line, and it was like they never got into consistency because one or a combination of those guys was like almost always on that COVID list. And if they get healthy and COVID's not an issue in the fall, you know, I think that especially with Richie Incognito, because Gruden like handpicked him to come in, I don't see them making a move on him. But you know, if it's one of these things, it's kind of like if there's a will, there's a way. Where you need Aguilar, yeah, you might have to sacrifice here. I just think Gruden's going to want to hang on to those linemen if he can.
yeah, and I kind of agree there, but I think Aguilar is one of those players that um, you need to keep. Also, looking at it from the last rumors I saw, it looks like they're going to release Tyrell Williams, and that right there
Yeah,
is going to save
yeah,
almost $12 million.
yeah. I mean, he did almost nothing last year. I mean, what he played in a couple games, and he was hurt like the whole season. So you know,
Yeah, so I mean they have the room. I think Aguilar or is probably the only candidate, and
yeah.
I think they really tried to work out a long-term deal with them, but if you can't, you put that franchise tag on him and keep him.
Cool, cool. Alrighty, next up we got the Los Angeles Chargers, and I'm showing them at ninth in cap space with 23.8 million. Pretty good position to be in. Uh, so I've got Melvin Ingram, defensive end slash linebacker, one of these edge guys, as their top priority free agent. Here's the thing. He's rated 90 overall by lineups. He's been a stalwart for this team for a long time. But at age 32, is he franchise tag worthy? Um, you know, if they think that this is one of these kind of situations where they can compete next year and they need him, but they don't want to sign him to a long-term deal, maybe it's a one-year rental kind of thing. I don't know. That's an interesting one to think about. Behind him is tight end Hunter Henry. He was the next man up with a rating of 86. I know that they'd like to hang on to him, especially since they hit the jackpot with Justin Herbert. But Hunter Henry, he's not like been spectacular to this point in his career. He's been good, but not great. And he's had a lot of injury issues. And so, same kind of thing. If he's franchise tag worthy, is he franchise tag worthy? I don't know. But I think if push comes to shove, he's probably the most likely guy because of the age and the potential and kind of the focus of what they're doing on the offense. But they've got money to spend in free agency, and I think they're better off spending it, spreading it around than kind of putting it into a franchise tag, in my opinion.
So, my web pages are doing weird shit on me, so I can't remember the number for a tight end. I would franchise tag Hunter Henry. I wouldn't franchise tag Melvin Ingram at all because the team's transitioning to a 3-4 defense as it is, and I don't think that Melvin Ingram will fit into the new defensive scheme that they're going to have under what's his name, Staley, whatever their new coach's name is.
Yep.
Staley. Yeah. So I think that Hunter Henry has this past year. If I'm trying to remember, yeah, I'm pretty sure this past year he was kind of that safety blanket for Herbert.
Typical for a rookie quarterback. They like the tight end.
Typical for a rookie quarterback,
yeah.
But they appeared to have that chemistry going on, and with that chemistry, that's important for the continued growth of the quarterback or of that rookie quarterback. So I would do whatever it takes to keep Hunter Henry. If it means I have to franchise tag him, I have to franchise tag him. I would obviously try to work out the deal and get him an extension. From what I'm reading, they're going to cut Trey Turner and they're going to have more cap space, even more cap space, because it's going to save them like $11 million. But I would keep Hunter Henry at all costs.
Yeah, that would make me a lot more comfortable. And I had a 11 million tag number for the tight end. Your number obviously was a couple million lower because it's adjusted for the COVID year, and so that makes it a lot more palatable. I just want to see him stay healthy and be a consistent contributor. That's my big concern with the guy.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, next up, I got the Miami Dolphins, and I'm showing them 8th in cap space with 25.2 million. Matt Breida was the top guy on my list with a 77 rating, but there's like no freaking way he gets the franchise tag. They rotated everybody and their mom at running back last year, and Breida did not take over and command that position when he did play. Everybody else in the list I had here was in the 70s, obviously lower than Breida, which I just don't think is high enough to justify the franchise tag. That's fine. Miami is well along on their path here to becoming a competitive team. And they were, like we talked about it, way ahead of schedule this past year. And so, take that money, find some free agents that you want. There's no reason to tag a guy if he's not going to be worth the dollar amount, in my opinion. So.
I don't have anything to add to that. That's basically my entire analysis of Miami. Plus with the rumors about the Watson trade, which that would be they'd be one of the teams. You're going to need that cap space to fit Watson in.
Well, it's good that you agreed with my assessment. Okay, next up I got the New England Patriots sitting at 3rd in cap space, 62.2 million. when I think about the Patriots, kind of like we were talking about Indy earlier, maybe looking at some wide receivers, this is a team where I feel like if they can get a quarterback, they need to figure out how to get a wide receiver because they just have never really been able to find a guy to be a true wide receiver one. And I know Edelman's been solid, okay? But you go back, you had a period of time with Wes Welker, not really a true number one. Edelman, not really a true number one. Really, like the only true number one they've really had was freaking Randy Moss for that short term that they had him. They clearly cannot draft and develop wide receivers like that. So go out, spend some of this money, and bring in a guy. But the point of today is basically looking at who you would tag. And so the guy I came up with that I think is the top priority is center David Andrews. He's got an 86 rating. We know Belichick loves to value a strong offensive line. The caveat is that he's letting guys walk from the offensive line. And so, they have the space to work with. Will they hang on to him? Will they let him go? I'm not sure. The other guy that I thought was intriguing was cornerback J.C. Jackson. He's got an 86 rating as well. And the difference, I think, between Andrews and Jackson is that Belichick has shown a tendency towards paying guys in the secondary. And so if it was between the two, I would kind of say the history would go in the favor of J.C. Jackson. My opinion is you want to lock up that offensive line, though. So I'd probably go the other way. But what do you see in here, man? I've heard people talking. Joe Tooney is another one as their guard. But I don't know. I would go Andrews over him. But what are you thinking, man?
So, I saw a lot about them talking about Tooney as being a franchise tag candidate, but because he was franchise tagged last year, coming into this year, placing the franchise tag on him again will cost nearly $18 million. And I would say that for Tooney, they're either going to sign him to a long-term deal or let him go. David Andrews, I don't see the value in a lot of their prominent free agents they have at the franchise tag number, and that's one thing ultimately Belichick looks at is the value he's getting back.
Yeah.
And I don't see them franchise tagging anyone because of that. They don't have that value guy to that be worth the franchise tag. Like maybe McCourty, but I don't know. I don't see them using it.
Fair enough. All right, so next up we got the New York Jets. I'm showing them sitting at second in cap space with $67.9 million. My opinion for them, they need to spend some of that money on defense. They brought in a rookie head coach, defensive-minded guy. Man, I don't know. I always get nervous with this kind of stuff because especially with Saleh being a Michigan guy, from Dearborn and whatnot, I see oftentimes the rookie head coaches, they spend the money on the other side of the ball thinking that, hey, I can make anybody work on my side of the ball because I'm just naturally good at that. And it usually doesn't work. And so for him, when I look at this roster, I see you got cornerback Brian Poole is their top-rated guy, 85 overall. And then behind him, you got safety Marcus May, also rated 85 overall. They've got the cap space. I'm thinking Poole probably gets the edge because they did just let Jamal Adams walk last year. It's kind of like a PR thing. How's it going to look if you tag a safety after you just let kind of like a generational talent and Jamal Adams leave? It's just like one of those weird kind of deals. But I think that they need to figure out how to get both of these guys. If they can only tag one of them, I would say Brian Poole. I'm not totally thrilled about it, but they got to hang on to some defensive guys, man.
So, I agree with you with the comment about how's it going to look if you tag a safety after letting Adams go. But one thing you have to remember about about Adams is Adams wanted out. There was a
Yeah.
clear rift there between Gase and Adams, and there was something wrong. So you wouldn't have been able to keep Adams as it was. He wouldn't play for that franchise. He probably would hold out. Probably would have done done what James Harden did in Houston and ate himself out of being
Yeah,
viable at that
you
position.
you think that they have a clean slate now with the new regime, that it's not going to be as big of an issue.
Yeah, and so what it boiled down to for me was I think Marcus May is the better candidate to
I thought the same thing, man. I thought the same thing, to be honest. I think
and
the safety position's a little bit harder to lock down these days. And for that rating, I think if they're both rated at 85 overall, I think that the 85 on a safety is stronger than the 85 on a cornerback. That's my opinion.
and plus looking at their depth chart last year, Poole wasn't even the starter.
Yeah.
So you definitely got to go with May on that one.
Yeah, and that's where some of this, the lineups ratings can be a little bit deceiving.
Yeah, but I just think based on the position he plays and the importance of that position in the secondary, you got to do what it takes to keep May.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Next up, the Pittsburgh Steelers. We kind of already covered them when we were talking about Roethlisberger earlier. But so I'm showing them at 29th in the league in cap space with 30.7 million over. We already talked about it. They got some tough decisions to make. Roethlisberger, if they let him go, obviously they can free up some space. I don't see how they could possibly do enough to tag a guy. But if they did, I think they want to tag defensive end Bud Dupree. I know they really, really like that guy. He's got an 82 rating. Behind him, you got linebacker Avery Williamson with an 80 rating, highly productive. Juju Smith-Schuster, we talked about it. He's expendable. They find wide receivers like it's nothing, man. Cornerback Mike Hilton, he's another solid guy that I'm sure they want to hang on to. I just, like I said, I just don't see how they could do it, how they could pull off the cap moves to get in a position to use the tag. And so I think this team's going to be, I don't know, it's not that they're in trouble, but it's that they're probably taking a step down in talent next year. That's just my opinion.
I agree with you on Pittsburgh taking a step down in talent this year. If you go through, there's room where they can cut players to get under the cap, but to get enough for a salary cap like Bud Dupree, it'd be like 15 million. Like so you have to cut like 35 35 million for what I have their number at. So you have to cut Roethlisberger, Hayden, Vince Williams, DeCastro. That's
Yeah,
what
well, they're not going to
16.
cut to Castro, but yeah,
But you would have to cut those. You would have to cut all four of those players practically to be
yeah,
able just to use that franchise tag. So it's not going to happen. It's just plain and simple not going to happen. They don't have the room for the cap space to be able to franchise tag anybody.
yeah. Just close the book. They can't do
Yep,
it. No way.
exactly.
Okay. Okay. Last but not least, I got the Tennessee Titans. I'm showing them sitting at 21st in cap space, 2.2 million over. So Jadeveon Clowney, defensive end linebacker. I think he played defensive end for them. He's their highest rated guy, 86 overall. My opinion, from everything I heard, they weren't really that impressed with him. He had the connection with Vrabel from their time in Houston. And it was one of these things where I don't know, like, did he have moments? Yeah, I'm sure he did, but was he a difference maker? No way. And so, not tag worthy. And so, unless he wants to stay on a more reasonable deal, I think he's gone. Uh, the one guy that I've been hearing a lot about, which I just don't see how it's going to work, is wide receiver Corey Davis. By the way, Western Michigan guy, just giving a little bit of the Michigan love there. Um, he finally had a solid season. He was a high first round pick however many years ago. I just don't think they're going to spend that much money on a wide receiver, uh, their wide receiver two for that matter, when they got A.J. Brown and they're already over the cap. So after him, I dug a little bit deeper, and quarterback Desmond King was the next man up. He had an 85 rating. I know they want to hang on to that guy. It just keeps going back to the cap is tight. You got to make some moves. Where do you draw that line? And, I don't see them doing anything with the franchise tag. I think they would have to make too many moves to accommodate it, but, it's not impossible. What are you seeing out of this team?
So, can you look up a rating for Adoree Jackson?
Yes, I will do that in just a moment.
Because I have Tennessee at like basically right at the cap. Like I have them like a few $100,000 under actually. And I
So
was
yeah,
looking,
I've got Adoree Jackson at 81 on lineups.
and Desmond King was an 86. You said
85.
close enough. And what about Malcolm Butler?
Malcolm Butler, he was lower. Let me just find him. 79. That's where I think, if push comes to shove, you're cutting Malcolm Butler.
So the franchise tag for cornerback this year is about 15 million. You have a couple $100,000 of cap space. You cut Adoree Jackson because he had his 5th-year option, which was picked up last year, but it doesn't become guaranteed until after the start of the league year. Cut Malcolm Butler and franchise tag Desmond King.
There you go, making it work.
And that's what I would do because I think Desmond King before is much more important to this team than Adoree Jackson or Malcolm Butler.
Yeah, I think Adoree Jackson had some special teams value, but honestly, Desmond King is like the clear-cut guy. I mean, special teams, you can go find a guy and get him for dirt cheap and roll the dice. I
Right,
don't
but
know.
you're right, and you don't want to keep a player around just for special teams and pay him more
No,
than $10
no,
million a year.
no, definitely not. Okay, well, we're good there. So that's it for the AFC teams, which moves us on to the question of the week. And so for this week, it got a little bit funky as I was going through this, and then with the Wentz thing, it kind of messed it up because I had him on my list here. But basically, for tonight, what I was going to do is kind of a little bit of a game of where do they end up with a handful of players. And so Wentz, I'll just cross him off the list because obviously his destination has been finalized. But we talked earlier about what's going on with Carolina. We talked about Dallas, tagging Dak. Here's the thing, dude, and maybe we talked about this before, but I could see a scenario that nobody is really talking about where Carolina maybe can't get Watson because it's a reach. I believe it's a reach. But there's always something funky going on with Dak in Dallas. And so would Carolina make a move for Prescott or another team in the mix? And I'm almost certain we talked about this one when we did our quarterback carousel, but fucking New England, man, they got so much cap space. Go out and get a guy like Dak if there is any chance that they're going to let him go because they're not totally happy with him. And you now have your quarterback of the future. And I think Dak would fit in flawlessly in that Josh McDaniels offense, man. And so, basically, this is just a short game of where do they end up. And Dak is my first one on here. Do you think he ends up in Dallas? Yes or no? And if it's no, where do you think he goes from there?
Okay, so Dak is an interesting case. Last year, he in the off season, before the season, they had basically agreed on the average annual value of the salary. Dak wanted it to be a 4-year contract. Dallas wanted it to be a 5-year contract, and that's why they couldn't come up with an agreement.
Yeah.
If you tag Dak again this year, it's a cousin situation again. He's
Yep.
your ex quarterback.
Yep.
I don't think they tag him. I think Jerry finally gives in and just does the 4-year contract that he didn't want to do last year. I have them at, well, I mean, they only have 20 million in space, so it's a little tight on a 4-year contract. Average value of 30 million. Like, even tagging Dak this year, they still have to
Shed some guys. Yeah.
shed some guys because it's 37 million almost 38 million that they would have to pay him. And
So
I think
Jerry kind of gets him for that 5 years. It's just that he franchise tagged him for the first year, and now he gives him the 4. And so it
right.
ends up kind of working the way he wanted to, just kind of in a weird kind of a way. So you're thinking he stays in Dallas?
But here's the thing about it. For the extension, like last year, it was 35 million. That was the average value that they agreed on, approximately. The starting point this offseason is $37.7 million per year.
I mean, you're splitting hairs for a quarterback, man. Honestly, I know that it's all important and you got to get the right number, but if I'm that close, I'm not going to let that prohibit the deal.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm just saying that
They're going to have to
at a
pay more because
minimum,
they didn't do it last time. Yeah.
exactly. They're gonna have to pay more because he has essentially, if they were to franchise tag him, which, I mean, I don't see them using the franchise tag on Dak.
Yeah.
We'll get
Yeah.
into more of that next week, but they have to shed some space and just sign him to the extension and do it. You listen to Jerry Jones talk about Dak, and Jerry Jones loves Dak. Stephen Jones loves Dak.
All of the sudden, yeah.
No,
But
no, even
it's
going
I'm just
into
I'm just saying
well,
it's if you loved him that much, talk is cheap. Let's show
yeah.
some
Oh,
action.
I agree. I agree, and it's just you need to. There's two teams in the league. There's a team with a franchise quarterback, and there's a team without
Yeah.
the franchise quarterback. You
Yeah.
don't want to be the team without the franchise quarterback because you're in hell.
Yeah, you're in no man's land. I agree. And that's why I don't understand why they didn't just fucking lock him up last year. It
Oh,
you
I
know,
agree.
and so that's where I put him in my thing for tonight. The next guy I had on here, we've already kind of talked about him a bit, was J.J. Watt. It's more of, where do you think he ends up? Obviously, he's not on a team right now, but, is it Cleveland? Is it Indy? Is it Tennessee? I like what you're saying with Indy, and you already kind of made your answer there. I think any of those spots, to be honest, Cleveland, Indy, or Tennessee, are good spots for him to end up. They're all playoff caliber teams, and he adds value to those teams.
See, the problem with Tennessee for him is they don't really have the cap space. They have to do some work to be
Yeah,
able
it's
to,
a money thing. Yep.
yeah. And then unless they were to convince him to sign for the veteran minimum, which I think is like $1 million or $2 million a year, and do some funky shit there. Cleveland has the cap space, but and there's
Are
ways
they
they could
hot
shed.
enough? Yeah, are they hot enough for him to say, "Yeah, we're gonna get him over the top?"
Here's the reason why I don't see him going to Cleveland. It's in the same division as both his brothers,
Yeah. I mean, I don't
and
know
they'd be
how
playing
much
each other
that is, but
twice a
yeah,
year.
yeah.
And
It could be a
I see
factor.
Pittsburgh more likely than Cleveland,
Okay.
which Pittsburgh doesn't have the cap space.
Yeah,
So I mean,
they're
it
not
just
gonna
boils
pull it
down
off. Yeah.
to who has the cap space to get him, and that's Indy. And I think he'd be a great addition to that already solid defense.
Okay. And I like that. That is sparked an interest with me. So the next guy I had on here was OBJ himself. We got a man that possibly is on the move. Cleveland's talking about, we're going to listen if people want to call, or whatever they were saying. And this goes back to kind of what I was saying earlier with both Indianapolis and New England. Indy, you now have your franchise quarterback in Wentz, or so you hope. So you hope in Wentz. Get him a weapon. Do you take a shot on OBJ, or do you stay away from it? It's dicey, because do you want to bring that guy into your locker room? But at the same time, what's your answer for wide receiver one if you don't? And then for New England, you have a hard time finding wide receivers. Here's one out there. You might have to pay for them in this trade, but Cleveland's going to carry some of the signing bonus stuff and whatever else, and so it's really not going to be like that horrible for New England. And Belichick's been good at controlling these egos, these crazy ass personalities. I don't know. I'm just kind of brainstorming OBJ landing spots, and those are kind of like the two wide receiver hungry teams that I've been seeing.
Okay, so looking at OBJ, first of all, Cleveland can't cut him because he went on the injured reserve last year, so that kicked in the injury guarantee for the 2021 season if they cut him. So that wouldn't, the only way to free up to
Well,
take
yeah, but
advantage.
they can trade him though, and that's
Right.
that's what I was talking about as a trade, because they've talked about, hey, if people are interested, we'll pick up the phone, or whatever their comment was.
Right, but I had I was just going through my thought process on
Okay.
him
Yeah.
because I don't think he's back in Cleveland. So I was trying to say, okay, so how do they get rid of him? They
Yeah.
can't cut him. There's the signing bonus. There's no more left for.
There's no more on their books.
Yeah, there's no
So
more.
can you
No more on the book.
so
He's,
so can
he
you
has.
so you can you agree in principle to restructure contingent upon a trade, is kind of
Yeah.
what you're getting at.
So he would have a dead cap hit to Cleveland if they traded him of 13 million, and which is interesting because there's no signing bonus, so there must be some guaranteed money still, like
There's
a
got to be
little bit
something
of.
in there. Yeah.
There's got to be something in there, and why it's 13 million, 12.791. Let me see.
While you're doing that, I'm going to pour myself a Hudson Baby Bourbon. They are not one of the sponsors of the show, but if they want to be, they can get a hold of us.
So okay, that's what it is. So his 2021 salary, so it wouldn't be a dead cap hit if they trade him. It would. So because his 2021 salary fully guarantees on the third league day of 2021, so on March 19th. But his 15.75 guaranteed now because of the injury guarantee. 15 million is a high price for Belichick to pay for a wide receiver.
I think he only does it if he can get a quarterback.
But I do remember back in the offseason between 18 and 19, there were a lot of rumors that Belichick was interested in trading for Beckham, and that was when he still had 20 million guaranteed. He was 17 million. He made 17 million in 2019.
Yeah.
So if he was willing to pay 17 million for him, then he definitely would pay 15 million for him a couple years later. And I see Belichick trying to work something to trade for Beckham.
It could happen. I'm glad we're on the same page there. All right, so the last guy I had on my list, this one has gotten really intriguing to me because of all the talk in Pittsburgh, is where does Big Ben end up? And my opinion at this point, when I look at their cap, is that there's no way they're bringing him back. And, maybe that's just me being negative or whatever. I don't know. I think that they're miffed about how it ended in the playoffs, and they're just ready to pull the plug because they know that they got to get out of salary cap hell. And so I started thinking of where could he go? And, salary cap is always an issue. I thought, hey, maybe Chicago. He's a cold weather quarterback already. That would be freaking sweet. Chicago's got a great defense. They got pieces that would give them a reason to lock down Allen Robinson. But then I look at the cap space and I'm like, yeah, I'm not so sure about that. But the team that I actually got excited about when I thought about this was freaking Denver, man, because Denver was at least rumored to be interested in Stafford. And when you were talking about it a while ago, it wasn't necessarily that they wanted to get a guy to be long term. It was that they could have potentially wanted a guy that had, a good couple years or a good year in him to help give Locke a mentor and give him time to develop. I mean, freaking Big Ben right there, dude. You put Locke on the pine for a year. You let Ben fucking take a shot at it. And then after that, Locke's your man. And I think for Big Ben, you're going to a team that has a solid defense. They've got wide receivers. They need to definitely build that offensive line. That's got to be a priority. But if he's adamant about coming back for one more year, I think it's not a bad spot for him to land.
I like your thinking with Denver. I hadn't considered Denver as a possible landing spot for Ben because I'm hearing a lot about Denver going after other quarterbacks that it's hard to for me to say that Ben would go there. But based on the logic I had already laid out previously, and you just laid out so eloquently, I agree with you. That's a good landing spot. Another possible landing spot I could see is Washington.
Oh, I'd love it if he ended up in Washington.
because you in Washington they need to draft a quarterback, um, and they need to develop him. And yeah, I think Ben could come in and be that stopgap quarterback for him. Plus, they have
Yeah.
enough cap space to be able to fit him in.
Yeah, that would be cool. And I mean, hey, they made the playoffs, and so it's probably a little bit more attractive for him.
Exactly. And plus with Rivera, like I mean, you put Ben on that Washington team. You have Ron Rivera as head coach. You instantly have the best quarterback, best coach in that division, and you would be the class of the division. Another possible team, and it's doubtful that this would happen, is New England.
Yeah, I'd like to see that just because, he could immediately make the Patriots basically competitive again. But yeah, I don't know. Something about it just doesn't seem like it would happen. It just seems like such an awkward fit for some reason.
Yeah, and it's such a high price, and Belichick wouldn't pay 30 million to Brady. Why the hell is he going to pay 50 million or whatever Ben makes to Ben?
Yeah, I mean, so his cap number's 41, but it's just because of the way that the contract played out. I would bet you if he's coming back for one more year, I don't know. I don't know. Something about me just I would think he would do a better deal for a team like New England, but I don't know. I guess I don't really know what Ben wants. Does he want money? It sounds like he wants to win another ring, and so if that's the case, and you think Belichick's the guy, you get there and you work your deal to make it happen. I don't know, but the Washington thing, I do like that one, man. I think that'd be a great spot for him too.
That's a good point because it's so 22, 19 million is a lot more palatable than 41 because it's signing bonus and restructuring bonus of 22 almost million.
Yeah, but that's if they trade him, is what you're saying.
Yeah, if they trade him or if they cut him, they save 19. They like if
Yeah,
Pittsburgh trades or cuts Roethlisberger, they save 19 million. So therefore, if they were to trade him, his salary cap hit for the new team would be 19 million. So that kind of
Yep.
opens it up more.
Oh,
I
big
didn't
time,
even,
big time. Yeah.
but I think like I don't see. I mean, possibly Dallas, but I mean they still, like I just said, they're gonna. I think they're gonna resign
I think, yeah,
Dak. So
I think Dallas is foolish if they let go of Dak. I just don't know why they haven't locked him down yet. That's the thing. It's like something seems wrong there, man. If they haven't done it by now, what is going on?
yeah, and you look at the other teams that he could possibly fit into under the cap. Arizona, they have their quarterback. Maybe San Francisco, but I see them if they're going to move on from Garoppolo, it's going to be a younger guy. I
Hmm.
mean, Tampa Bay, they already have Brady. Baltimore, they have their quarterback. Cleveland, they have their quarterback. The Chargers, they have their quarterback. Carolina, they're looking more long term. Like, I mean, there's very few teams, and I
Yeah,
guess that's why probably Denver, Washington, or New England are the only potential ones.
yeah, it's a small market for him. Well, hey, that was it. That was all I had on my little game of where will they end up. So, yeah, for anybody who's watching, let me know your thoughts. Hit us up in the comments section. James, that's all I had for tonight, man. What do you got? Any closing thoughts, anything like that?
No, that's all I had.
Alrighty. Well, hey, for anybody who's still watching, if you like the show, give us a thumbs up, hit us up with some comments, and definitely hit that subscribe button. Alrighty, James, it was fun. I will catch you later, man.
All right, sounds good. Have a good one.
Gridiron Grinder. Hut hut hike.